All right, so have you ever felt that like anticipation right before a roller coaster takes off? That kind of mix of excitement and, oh my God, what am I doing? That's kind of how I'm feeling about crypto right now.
Yeah, that feeling of being on the edge of something huge, right?
Exactly. Like we might be about to witness a real golden era for this whole space, something people will be talking about for years.
It's not just a vibe, though, is it? There's this convergence of things happening that suggests this isn't just another quick pump and dump. We might be talking about a fundamental shift for digital assets.
And, you've been really zeroing in on this whole made in America narrative. What's caught your attention there?
Well, you know me, I'm macro bullish on crypto, especially altcoins, the ones pushing boundaries. But recently, there's been this really intriguing shift, and this made in America thing seems central to it all.
It's like a missing piece of the puzzle suddenly clicking into place.
Ex-
I mean, think about it. Trump Media, the folks behind Truth Social, joining forces with Crypto.com. They're talking about launching crypto ETFs, but with a very specific made in America spin.
It's a bold move for sure.
It's a statement.
It makes you think, what are they seeing that maybe others aren't?
Right. And if you connect this to the wider context, it suggests a potential change in the regulatory landscape. I mean, the fact that these ETFs could include Bitcoin, CRO, and other digital assets, with a launch planned later this year, pending those all-important regulatory approvals, it hints at a growing acceptance from within the U.S.
Maybe even more than acceptance, a welcoming. It's a far cry from the pushback we've seen before.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder, are we seeing a shift, subtle but significant, from the U.S. administration, maybe even the SEC? It hasn't always felt like they were exactly rolling out the red carpet for crypto.
To put it mildly.
And it's not just this one thing. There's talk of countries thinking about Bitcoin as part of their strategic reserves. There are whispers about certain altcoins being strategically positioned, and then you have major figures actually mentioning projects like Cardano and XRP.
It does feel like a lot of pieces are falling into place.
It's almost like dot orchestrated, you know?
And that brings us to this interesting question about the bigger economic picture.
Right, like what happens if the U.S. goes all in on crypto innovation and adoption?
The potential for new revenue streams flowing into the country, maybe even impacting tax revenue, that becomes very interesting.
It suggests that crypto isn't just some niche financial asset anymore. It could be a serious player in the overall economic growth story.
Precisely. And that leads to the idea of a golden era for America, right? Driven by shifts in global trade, a focus on our own economy, and now, potentially, leadership in the crypto space.
And that's the big question, isn't it? What if the U.S. really steps up as the leader in crypto adoption and figures out smart regulations?
What kind of impact could that have on the entire crypto world?
It feels like we could be on the verge of something absolutely game-changing.
It does, doesn't it? And to try and grasp the scale of what might happen, the ups and downs along the way, it helps to look back at history. You've been drawing some pretty intriguing parallels with the tech boom of the late 90s and early 2000s.
It feels like we're at a similar point of exponential potential.
Yeah.
Like back in the early days of the internet, remember that sense of sheer possibility? Crypto feels like that now, but maybe even on a larger, more global scale. And to really get a grip on the kind of wild ride we might be in for, I've been thinking a lot about Amazon's journey back in the early 2000s.
Now, I know that might sound like comparing apples and oranges at first glance.
Yeah.
But what's so fascinating is how market psychology, the way people react, and the life cycle of disruptive technologies, they can show surprisingly similar patterns, even across different time periods. So paint us that picture of early Amazon. What was going on?
Okay, so imagine this. The dot-com bubble bursts. It's a complete bloodbath for tech stocks. And Amazon, a company that had so much hype, so much promise, gets absolutely destroyed. The stock price plunges a mind-boggling 95%. We're talking about it plummeting from around $106 all the way down to about $5.50.
That's a devastating drop.
It's hard to even comprehend that kind of loss.
And at the time, so many people just wrote them off, right? Another casualty of the internet hype.
Failure was the headline.
And that feeling, that sense that the hype had completely evaporated, that's the key parallel, isn't it? The market had given up on Amazon, decided it was a failed experiment.
Exactly. But that's where the story gets really interesting. Despite that brutal crash, all those doubters, Amazon didn't just disappear. They showed incredible resilience.
And that resilience is crucial.
And maybe even more importantly, Jeff Bezos had this long-term vision. He believed in what they were building. They kept investing, kept innovating, even when it seemed like the world had moved on. And that's what set the stage for one of the most remarkable comebacks in business history.
It makes you think what seemingly failed project today might become the next Amazon.
Right, what's flying under the radar that we're all going to be kicking ourselves for not seeing.
Exactly. And you've been looking at some interesting visual data, specifically this yellow shape, what you're calling a fractal,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
seems to map out a potentially bullish future for the total value of all altcoins.
All the altcoins combined.
Yeah, how does that Amazon story visually connect to what you're seeing in the crypto markets?
It's actually kind of eerie when you really look at it. When you see Amazon's stock chart leading up to the dot-com crash, that crazy climb, that sense of unstoppable momentum, and then bam, that massive 95% drop. And then you overlay that with the historical chart of the total altcoin market cap. The visual similarities are striking. You see that same parabolic rise, followed by a similarly brutal correction.
Almost like they're following the same script.
Right. And just like Amazon trying to find its feet after that crash, trying to build a base, you see the altcoin market cap showing signs of recovery, trying to build higher support levels.
The key takeaway there is the human element, right? Because after a drop that big, the overwhelming feeling is despair.
Oh, absolutely.
It's incredibly hard to imagine a comeback, let alone another period of huge growth. It takes a special kind of thinking to see potential in the wreckage.
A contrarian, right?
Yeah, someone who's willing to bet against the crowd. And that brings us to a specific project that you found interesting parallels with early Amazon Cardano, or ADA. What is it about that comparison from a fundamental perspective that stands out to you?
You know, it's interesting. When you look at their approach, there are some pretty strong similarities. Amazon, in its early days, was very deliberate, almost methodical in how they built their business. It wasn't about chasing crazy, unsustainable growth at any cost. They were focused on building a solid foundation, long-term thinking.
Playing the long game.
And that really resonates with how Cardano has been developed. There's a real emphasis on peer-reviewed research, rigorous testing, a very step-by-step, principled approach to building. It's about getting it right, not just getting it out there fast.
Quality over speed.
Exactly. It's about building something that lasts. But you've also pointed out a really important difference between Amazon's eventual comeback and what we've seen in crypto lately, especially with how Cardano performed after the big downturn. What's that key distinction we need to keep in mind?
The difference boils down to the bigger economic environment, specifically what the Federal Reserve, the central bank of the U.S., is doing. Amazon's huge comeback in 2002 happened when the Fed was easing monetary policy, a strategy often called quantitative easing. It basically means they were pumping more money into the economy. That tends to create a good environment for businesses to grow and asset prices, like Amazon stock, to recover.
Think of it like adding fuel to the economic engine.
Exactly. Now, the recent bear market in crypto, including Cardano's dip, happened during a period of quantitative tightening. The Fed was doing the opposite, pulling money out of the economy.
And the brakes.
Exactly. And that tends to put downward pressure on riskier assets, like cryptocurrencies. But here's the thing. Most people think this tightening is almost over, and there's even talk of going back to quantitative easing. That shift could create a much more supportive environment for crypto, maybe even similar to what helped fuel Amazon's incredible rise.
So you're saying the Fed could be about to switch from brakes to gas pedal?
Potentially. And if we look back at historical trends in the federal funds rate, which is the benchmark interest rate in the U.S., the big growth period for Amazon and the whole tech sector really took off as those rates started to fall. Are we maybe looking at a similar pattern for crypto as interest rates potentially start to come down again?
It's a compelling argument. And then you layer on top of that this whole made in America narrative around crypto, the idea that the U.S. could become the leader in this space, driving innovation and economic growth. It could bring a huge wave of capital and excitement into the crypto markets.
It's a potent combination, the right macroeconomic factors, and a potentially supportive regulatory environment.
It really feels like all these pieces are aligning. But you've also made a really important point about the difference in starting points in terms of valuation.
Right.
Remind us of that contrast between early Amazon and where a project like Cardano is today.
It's crucial to keep things in perspective. During its toughest time after the dot-com crash, Amazon's total market value had fallen to about $2 billion. Even after the big crypto downturn we've seen, Cardano's market cap is significantly higher than that, around $25 billion. It suggests that while the potential for growth is still massive, the percentage gains might look different. A tenfold increase from $2 billion is a different game than a tenfold increase from 25 billion.
Right, the scale is just different.
Yeah.
So let's tie it all together. We've talked about historical parallels, potential catalysts with this Made in America focus, the huge influence of monetary policy, and even that fascinating, though not perfect, analogy with Amazon's rise. For listeners trying to make sense of all this, what's the key takeaway? What should we be focusing on?
The data points towards a potential turning point for the crypto market. The possibility of a friendlier regulatory environment in the U.S., the expected shift in monetary policy, and the constant technological advancements in crypto all suggest that a crypto golden era isn't just a fantasy. For long-term investors, these are trends worth paying attention to. It's about seeing the bigger picture beyond the daily price swings.
Tuning out the noise.
Exactly.
It definitely gives you a lot to think about. It's so easy to get caught up in the day-to-day chaos of crypto, but taking a step back and looking at these bigger trends, the potential is really exciting. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive. It's always mind-blowing to connect these seemingly separate dots.
Always a pleasure. The key is to stay informed, be critical, and understand how these long-term forces are interacting.
Absolutely. Now, we want to hear from you. What do you think about this potential Made in America crypto golden era? Do you see the parallels with Amazon? Jump into the comments, let us know. And if you found this deep dive valuable, hit that like button, share it with anyone who might find this perspective interesting. It feels like we're on the edge of something truly special, and it's going to be amazing to watch it all unfold. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time for another deep dive.
Until then,
Take care.
see ya.